Didn't cry. That's the part nobody expects when I tell this story. They wait for the moment I break down, or throw something, or scream in the parking lot. But I didn't do any of that. I stood in my mother's kitchen, with the smell of her coffee still in the air, and I just went very, very quiet. That was 8 months ago. I'm still processing parts of it. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old, and by the time this happened, I had spent 6 years building a catering and event design company from a folding table in my apartment. Not a metaphor. An actual folding table I bought secondhand from a church sale for $12. I used it to assemble sample boxes, mock up centerpiece arrangements, and practice plating techniques at 2 in the morning while my roommate's cat watched me from the couch. The company was called Fern Co. We did corporate luncheons, private dinners, wedding receptions, nonprofit galas. By year 4, I had 7 full-time staff and a commercial kitchen lease in the Midtown area of Atlanta. By year 5, our annual revenue had crossed $2.1 million. By the time everything fell apart, we were tracking toward $2.8 million, and I had just signed a preliminary agreement with a boutique hotel group for a 3-year catering contract that would have been the biggest deal of my career. I had done all of it without a business loan, without a cosigner, without any financial help from my family. I want to be precise about that because it matters to what comes next. My father passed when I was 22. My mother remarried a few years later, a man I'll call my stepfather, and moved from our small hometown in South Carolina to a suburb of Atlanta to be near my older brother. My brother, I'll call him Marcus, had 2 kids by the time he was 27 and had worked the same mid-level logistics job for years. He was not unhappy exactly, but he had never built anything. He had never taken a risk that wasn't handed to him first. None of that mattered to me. He was my brother. I loved him. I babysat his kids, showed up to their school plays, texted him stupid memes on Sunday mornings. When I moved to Atlanta to launch Fern Co., I thought our proximity would bring us closer, and in some ways it did. What I didn't know was that my closeness to him, and to my mother, and to my stepfather, was being used to make a plan I was never included in. My mother called me in early March. She said she wanted to have Sunday dinner, just the family, nothing special. I brought flowers from the farmer's market because that's what I do, and I brought a new appetizer I was testing for a spring menu. She seemed distracted when she let me in. My stepfather was watching TV in the other room. Marcus was already at the table, which was unusual. He was usually late to everything. Over dinner, my mother said she had been thinking about the future. I assumed she meant something about retirement, or maybe the house. She and my stepfather had been talking about downsizing. She said, "I've been thinking about what happens to Fern Co." I put down my fork. She said she'd been watching me work myself into the ground for years. She said she worried about me. She said Marcus had always been a hard worker and that he had a family to think about, a mortgage, 2 kids in school, and that she felt it would be the right thing, the fair thing, to bring him in as an equal partner. Co-owner. 50%. I waited for her to say she was joking. She wasn't. I asked her as calmly as I could manage what any of that had to do with her. The company was mine. My name was on every filing, every lease, every contract. She had no legal authority over any of it. That's when Marcus slid a folder across the table. Inside was a document, a partnership transfer agreement. It had my signature on it. I had never seen that document before in my life. I picked it up. I looked at it for a long time. I looked at my name, my actual signature or something close enough to it that my hands started shaking. I looked at Marcus. I looked at my mother. My stepfather had turned off the TV and was standing in the doorway. I asked, "What is this?" My mother said I had signed it 6 months ago. She said I had agreed to bring Marcus in as a partner and that the paperwork had just taken time to process. She said I must have forgotten because I was always so busy. I had never signed anything. Not 6 months ago. Not ever. Not a partnership agreement, not a letter of intent, not a preliminary discussion document. Nothing. I said that very clearly. Marcus said I was being dramatic. He said this was a good thing for the family. He said I had always been the strong one and that this was my chance to share that strength, like it was a compliment. I stood up. I picked up my purse. I said I was leaving, and that they should not contact me until I had spoken to my attorney. My mother called my name as I walked to the door. I didn't answer. I sat in my car in her driveway for 4 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. I wasn't deciding whether to go back inside. I was deciding whether to go back inside. I was deciding whether to scream. I decided not to. I drove home. I poured a glass of water. I sat at my kitchen table, a real one now, not the folding kind. And I opened my laptop. The first thing I did was call my business attorney the next morning. Her name is not important, but she has been with me since year 2, and she is the kind of person who does not panic, which is exactly what I needed. I sent her a photo of the document Marcus had slid across the table. She called me back within the hour. She told me the document was not filed anywhere. It had no notarization. It had not been submitted to the Georgia Secretary of State's office, which would be required for any legitimate ownership transfer of a registered LLC. She said whoever created it had no idea how business law actually worked, which told her something about how seriously they'd thought this through. She also told me the signature didn't match my filing signatures on record. Not exactly. Close but not exact. We started building a file that same day. What I did not do was call my mother. I did not call Marcus. I did not send an angry text at midnight or show up at anyone's door demanding answers. I went to work on Monday. I ran my business. I kept my face completely neutral every time my phone lit up with their names. My mother called 3 times in the first week. I let them go to voicemail. Marcus sent me a long text on a Wednesday evening. He said he understood I was upset, but that this was what families do for each other. He said he had always supported me. He said his kids deserve stability. He said I had more than enough. I read it twice. I didn't respond. What Marcus didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had already begun to understand the full picture of what they'd attempted. And the more I understood, the more I realized this had not been a spontaneous Sunday dinner conversation. This had been planned. My attorney found that someone, we believe Marcus, based on the timeline, had contacted 2 of my vendors in January, presenting himself as a co-owner of Fern Co, and requesting updated billing contacts. One vendor had flagged it internally but hadn't told me because they assumed it was a routine staff update. Another had actually sent a revised contract to an email address I didn't recognize, one that appeared to use a close variation of my company name. My stepfather, I later learned, had a cousin who worked as a paralegal decades ago and had apparently helped draft the fake document. The signature was traced back to a PDF copy of my name from an old lease I had signed years ago that my mother had a copy of from when she briefly helped me look at rental properties. They had taken my signature from a document I had legitimately signed and used it to create something I never agreed to. That is forgery. That is fraud. I want to say those words plainly because the people in my life who heard this story kept softening it. Oh, it's a family misunderstanding. Oh, they didn't really mean harm. No. They knew exactly what they were doing. They just thought I wouldn't do anything about it. My attorney filed a cease and desist in April. She sent copies to Marcus, to my mother, and to my stepfather. She included documentation of the vendor contacts Marcus had made under false pretenses, the email address discrepancy, and a forensic statement on the signature inconsistency. My mother called me crying the same afternoon it arrived. She said she didn't know it would go this far. She said Marcus had told her it was all taken care of legally. She said she had trusted him. She said she was sorry, but the sorry was wrapped in so many other things. But I was worried about him. But he has children. But I thought you would understand. That it barely felt like an apology at all. It felt like an explanation of why she had decided I was the one who could absorb the loss. I let her finish. I said, I know you love me, and I know this isn't what you thought would happen. But you sat at that table and told me I had signed something I never signed, and you expected me to accept it. I'm not going to do that. She started to say something about family. I said, I have to go. I hung up. The next few weeks were strange. Fern Co kept running. We had a corporate retreat booking in May, a wedding in June, and a non-profit fundraiser that I had been planning for 4 months. My staff didn't know what was happening. I kept it that way. They showed up, they prepped, they executed, and the feedback from every event was excellent. But I was walking through it with something tight in my chest. Not grief, exactly. More like the feeling you get when you realize the foundation you thought was solid has a crack in it that's been there a long time. You don't stop living in the house. You just look at the walls differently. There was one moment, at the June wedding, where I was standing outside the venue at dusk watching the team break down the cocktail hour setup and transition to the reception tables. Everything was moving the way it was supposed to. Flowers were in the right place. The lighting was exactly what the couple had asked for. My lead coordinator was managing the timeline without needing me at all. I had built that. Every system, every hire, every process. I had done it alone, on $12 tables and second-chance vendor relationships, and years of not sleeping enough. And someone had looked at all of it and thought the right thing to do was hand half of it to someone else without asking me. I didn't cry at the wedding, but I came close, and it wasn't because of the couple. In July, Marcus reached out directly for the first time since the cease and desist, not through an attorney. Just a text from his personal number that said, "I hope we can get past this. I made a mistake. I was trying to help my family." I sat with that for a while. I genuinely did. Because I know what it is to feel like you're falling behind. I know what it is to look at someone else's stability and feel the gap between where you are and where you want to be. I have had nights where I couldn't make payroll and I called no one because there was no one to call. I understand the weight of it. But understanding something is not the same as excusing it. He had forged my name. He had approached my name. He had approached my vendors. He had sat at that table and let my mother tell me I had agreed to something I never agreed to. And then he had sent me a text that said, "I hope we can get past this," as if I was the one creating an obstacle. I didn't respond. My attorney had been in contact with Marcus's attorney. Yes, he had hired one by then. And by the end of July, we had reached an agreement. There would be no legal action filed, in exchange for a signed and notarized statement acknowledging that the partnership document was not legitimate, that Marcus had no ownership interest in Fern Co., and that he would not contact my vendors, clients, or staff again. He signed it. I don't know what it cost him, emotionally or financially. I'm not sure I care. And I'm working through what that says about me. My mother texted me in August. She said she missed me. She said she wanted to have coffee and talk. She said she thought we could work through it as a family. I thought about what I wanted to say for almost 2 days. I said, "I love you, but I need more time." That was honest. I do love her, and I do need more time. I'm not sure when I'll have enough of it. Some days I think 6 months from now. Other days I'm not so sure. What I know is this: I did not burn anything down. I didn't go to the press. I didn't post anything on social media. I didn't call every person in my family and deliver a verdict. I handled it quietly and legally and completely. The company is still mine. Every filing, every lease, every vendor contract, every client relationship, all of it exactly where I left it. The hotel group contract came through in September. 3 years. It's the biggest deal I've ever signed, and I signed it with my actual hand. On paper, I actually read, in a room where everyone present had my actual consent. There's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. It's that the people who love you are sometimes the ones most likely to believe your success belongs to everyone. Like the fact that they watched you build it means they built it too. Like proximity is the same as contribution. Like love is a kind of ownership. It isn't. I built Fern Co. in years when my family was not there. In years when I was eating sandwiches over my laptop and learning food safety certifications and cold calling venues that had never heard of me. I built it in the years before any of it looked like something worth wanting. And when it became something worth wanting, they came to the table, literally, to my mother's kitchen table, and said it was time to share. I don't think sharing is wrong. I believe in generosity. I believe in family. I believe in community. I believe that success that isolates you isn't worth much. But sharing is a choice. It is not a thing that can be taken from you and called generosity. No one gets to take what I built and call it love. I still work long hours. I still show up before my team and leave after them most days. I've started running in the mornings, which I never used to do, and I think it's because I needed something that was purely mine, just my body and the road and no one waiting for a deliverable. Some mornings, running in the quiet before Atlanta wakes up, I feel something that is close to peace. Not every morning, but some. And some is enough, for now. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in a dramatic way, just quietly. The way you think about things when you're running at 6 in the morning and there's nobody around to perform for. What Marcus did had consequences. What my mother did had consequences. Not because the universe has some scoreboard it's keeping. I don't believe in that. But because actions move in directions. You push something hard enough and eventually it pushes back. He forged my name, contacted my vendors under false pretenses, and sat at a dinner table while my mother told me I had agreed to something I never agreed to, and then he signed a legal statement acknowledging none of it was legitimate. That's not karma. That's just what happens when you build something on a lie. The structure doesn't hold. I think about the version of me that could have exploded that Sunday night. I really do. I could have screamed. I could have said everything I was feeling right there in my mother's kitchen. Could have made it ugly and loud and unresolvable. There was a part of me that wanted to. But I've learned, slowly, not easily, that the most powerful thing I can do in any situation is stay clear-headed long enough to actually think. Clarity is a form of strength that nobody can take from you. They can forge your signature. They can't forge your judgment. That's the thing I keep coming back to. Intelligence isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about not letting your emotions make your decisions for you when the stakes are real. When I picked up that folder and saw my name on something I'd never signed, every instinct I had said react. I chose to observe instead. And that 4-minute sit in my mother's driveway, watching the clock. Deciding not to scream. That was one of the most important decisions I've made in my adult life. Marcus had every opportunity I had. Not the same circumstances, sure. But he had access to resources, to information, to time. He chose to look at what I built and figure out how to take part of it rather than build something of his own. And I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because I think it's true that we become what we repeatedly choose. He repeatedly chose the shortcut, and the shortcut collapsed. My mother is a more complicated thing for me to sit with. She loves me, I know she does, but love without respect isn't the whole thing. You can love someone and still fail to see them as a full person with full rights over what they've created. She saw my company as a family asset because she had watched me build it. Proximity made her feel like a stakeholder. And I think she genuinely believed she was doing something kind. That's the part I have to hold alongside the anger. She was wrong in a way that cost me real time, real legal fees, real emotional weight. But she wasn't malicious the way Marcus was. She was just not thinking clearly about what actually belonged to me. I'm still working out what I owe her in terms of forgiveness and access. Some days, I think I'll get there. Other days, I'm not sure what there even looks like. What I know is that I'm not in a hurry to decide. Fern Co. is mine. The hotel contract is signed. My team is strong. I ran 4 miles this morning before anyone else was awake, and the city was quiet, and I felt, not healed exactly, but intact. Which is enough. Build your own things. Protect them clearly and legally. And when someone tries to take what you made and calls it family, remember, love is not the same as ownership, and generosity is only real when it's chosen freely. I chose to build. Nobody gets to unchoose that for me.